Star Trek's iconic weapons got a radical redesign for the big screen, but these sleek new phasers came with a price tag that could buy a luxury car, required emergency downsizing to save money, and were painted the exact color of a 1979 BMW. From patent applications filed as toy weapons to props that cost more than most people's annual salary, the phasers from the motion picture hide bizarre production secrets that even die-hard Trekkies never knew. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about the phasers. Fact 1. The $4,000 phaser price tag. When Star Trek the motion picture went into production in the late 1970s, the filmmakers wanted everything to look bigger and better than the original television series, and that ambition extended to the crew's hand phasers. Property master Dick Rubin was tasked with creating completely redesigned weapons that would look convincing on the big screen. And what he came up with was technologically impressive, but came with a price tag that shocked everyone involved in the production. Each hero phaser prop cost a staggering $4,000 to produce, which would be equivalent to roughly $17,000 in today's money. To put that in perspective, the average new car in 1979 cost around $5,000, meaning these props cost nearly as much as an entire automobile. So what made these phasers so expensive? Unlike the simpler props from the original series, the motion picture phasers were entirely self-contained units with their own internal circuitry, batteries, and 4 blinking lights built right into the weapon itself. They were essentially functioning electronic devices rather than simple painted plastic shells. The lights were designed to blink in sequence, giving the phaser a futuristic, high-tech appearance that would hold up under close-up photography on the big screen. This level of internal electronics and precision engineering pushed the cost into territory that was almost unheard of for hand props at the time. The expense made these some of the most costly hand props ever created for a Star Trek production up to that point, and the budget-conscious studio executives were not happy when they saw the bills coming in. The price tag would soon force production to make some dramatic changes to save money, as keeping every phaser at this level of sophistication simply wasn't financially sustainable for the dozens of props needed to arm the entire Enterprise crew and extras throughout the film. Fact 2. Emergency downsizing to save money. After seeing the $4,000 price tag for each fully equipped hero phaser, the producers of Star Trek the motion picture knew they had a serious problem on their hands because they needed multiple weapons for the cast and extras throughout the film. The solution they came up with was dramatic but necessary, and it fundamentally changed the physical design of most of the phasers that would actually be used. During filming, to cut costs and make the props more affordable, production made the decision to drop the built-in lights from most of the phasers, eliminating the internal circuitry and batteries that had driven up the price so significantly. This cost-cutting measure had an unexpected side effect that nobody had anticipated during the planning stages. When the electronics were removed from the design, the physical size of the phaser was reduced by 1/3, making it noticeably smaller and more compact than the original fully equipped version. The change was significant enough that you can actually spot the size difference if you compare photos of the expensive hero props with their lights to the cheaper stunt versions without electronics. In the end, only 15 phasers were made for the entire film, which was a relatively small number considering how many crew members served aboard the Enterprise and how many extras appeared in various scenes. The majority of these 15 props were non-functional stunt phasers without any working electronics, designed purely to look good on camera from a distance. Only a handful were the expensive, fully functional hero props with blinking lights, and these were reserved exclusively for close-up shots where the details and electronics would actually be visible to the audience. This two-tiered approach to prop making allowed the production to maintain the futuristic look they wanted while keeping costs somewhat under control. Fact 3. Painted BMW anthracite gray. When it came time to choose a paint color for the hero phasers in Star Trek, the motion picture the production team made an unusual decision that connected these futuristic weapons to something far more down-to-earth than anyone might expect. The hero phasers were painted in a very specific automotive color called BMW Anthracite Gray, which was the exact same shade used on 1979 BMW vehicles that were being driven on roads at the same time the movie was being filmed. This meant that Captain Kirk and his crew were carrying weapons painted the same color as luxury German cars, though most viewers would never make that connection while watching the film. The choice of automotive paint wasn't just about finding any gray color that looked good, because anthracite gray had very particular qualities that made it ideal for the futuristic aesthetic the filmmakers were trying to achieve. This shade is a dark, sophisticated gray with subtle metallic undertones that catch the light in interesting ways, giving the surface a sense of depth and technological advancement. When applied to the phasers, it created a distinctive appearance that felt both alien and somehow familiar at the same time, which was exactly the balance the production designers wanted to strike for a 23rd century weapon. For years after the film's release, prop collectors and replica makers tried to identify the exact color used on the original phasers by examining photographs and studying screen captures, but the specific paint formulation remained something of a mystery. It wasn't until dedicated fans started comparing the props to automotive paint samples that the BMW connection was discovered. Some replica builders have also suggested that Tamiya XF75 IJN Gray comes close to matching the base color, but BMW Anthracite Gray remains the color most closely associated with the authentic hero props from the film. Fact 4. Patented as a toy weapon. Property master Richard M. Rubin took the unusual step of filing a design patent for the motion picture phaser, submitting the application in April of 1979 while the film was still in production. The patent was officially issued on July 21, 1981, more than 2 years after the initial filing and well after the movie had already been released in theaters. What makes this patent particularly odd is how it was classified, because instead of being designated as a prop or replica or any other term that might suggest its connection to a major Hollywood film, the patent labeled the phaser design as a toy weapon. Design patents in the United States are granted based on the unique appearance or concept of an item, rather than its functional usefulness, and they're typically sought for items where the visual design is just as important as the craftsmanship itself. The classification as a toy weapon likely had to do with protecting the design for future merchandise and licensed products that Paramount hoped to sell to fans, because calling it a toy opened up commercial possibilities that a simple prop designation might not have covered. The patent drawings themselves reveal something interesting about the development process, because the control panel configuration shown in the official patent documentation is noticeably different from what actually appeared on the finished phasers seen in the movie. The button layout and panel details don't match any of the existing photographs of the screen-used props, which strongly suggests that Rubin filed the patent based on an early design concept before the final version was completed. The patent also shows a very definite belt clip for hooking the phaser onto a uniform, which appeared on at least one hero prop but wasn't consistently present on all versions, adding another layer of variation to the phaser's complex design history. Fact 5. Vacuum-formed construction. The construction method used to create the motion picture phasers represented a significant departure from how props had been made for the original Star Trek television series, relying on manufacturing techniques that were becoming increasingly popular in the film industry during the 1970s. Unlike the original series phasers, which were built using more traditional methods involving hand-sculpted components in various materials, the motion picture phasers were constructed using vacuum-formed plastic. Pulls, a process that involved heating sheets of plastic and using vacuum pressure to form them over molds into the desired shapes. The number of pieces used in the construction varied depending on what type of prop was being created, with the simpler stunt phasers being made from two-piece vacuum-formed pulls that consisted of left and right sides joined together. The more elaborate hero props that were used for close-up shots were constructed using either 2 or 3 pieces, with some sources suggesting that the 3-piece construction allowed for more detailed control panels and internal electronics to be integrated into the design. After the basic vacuum-formed shells were created, additional details like the control panel, trigger, emitter, and various surface features were added on top of the base structure. This vacuum-forming manufacturing method offered several important advantages that made it ideal for a production that needed to create multiple props while keeping costs under control. The process was considerably cheaper than traditional model-making techniques that required extensive hand sculpting and fabrication, and it was also much faster, allowing the prop department to produce multiple phasers in the time it would have taken to hand-build just 1 or 2. The technique had become standard practice for creating lightweight props and set pieces throughout Hollywood by this time, representing the kind of practical innovation that helped films manage their budgets while still achieving impressive visual results. Fact 6. Recycled for Wrath of Khan. When production began on Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan in 1981, the filmmakers faced the practical challenge of needing phaser props for the crew, but working with a significantly smaller budget than the first film had enjoyed. Rather than creating an entirely new set of weapons from scratch, the production team made the economical decision to recycle several of the stunt phasers that had been created for the motion picture, giving them a new paint job to distinguish them from their appearance in the earlier film. This meant that the same physical props that had appeared in the hands of Enterprise crew members during their encounter with V'Ger were now being used again during Kirk's confrontation with Khan, making these phasers some of the hardest working props in Star Trek film history. The repainting process involved changing the color scheme to a different shade, with the Wrath of Khan phasers receiving a metallic blue finish that was noticeably different from the dark gray used in the motion picture. Photographs of screen-used props from both films show clear evidence of this reuse, with experts who have examined the actual props confirming that the underlying construction and dimensions remained identical between the two productions. This fact has created some confusion among prop collectors and replica makers over the years, because there's a persistent belief in the collecting community that the motion picture phasers were larger than the Wrath of Khan versions. However, people who have actually handled screen-used stunt phasers from both films confirm that this is a misconception and the weapons were actually the same size in both movies. The difference in appearance likely comes from variations in camera angles, lighting, and the color schemes, which can create optical illusions that make props appear different sizes even when they're physically identical. Fact 7. Never fired on screen. Here's one of the most ironic facts about the motion picture's expensive phaser props. Despite all the time, money, and effort that went into creating these futuristic weapons as the standard issue sidearms of the Enterprise crew, the hand phasers are never actually fired at any point during the film's runtime. Throughout the entire movie, these weapons remain holstered or are simply carried by crew members, but no one ever pulls the trigger and unleashes a phaser beam at an enemy or threat. This means that audiences never got to see what these redesigned weapons could actually do, making them essentially very expensive background props that served no active purpose in the story. The reason for this strange situation lies in a deleted scene that was originally planned for the film but never made it to the final cut. In this scene, when V'Ger's blinding light probe materializes on the Enterprise bridge, two security guards advance on it with their phasers drawn and ready. Before Chekhov can warn them not to fire, one of the guards pulls the trigger and shoots at the probe. In retaliation, the probe envelops the security guard in a purple glow, and the man vanishes completely, presumably absorbed into V'Ger's memory banks. This action causes the second guard to quickly holster his weapon, realizing that attacking the probe is futile and dangerous. However, this sequence was never completed because the visual effects team ran out of time during post-production and had to make difficult decisions about which scenes to finish. The special effects showing the guard being digitized by V'Ger were never completed, so the entire scene was cut from the assembled movie. This meant that the phaser beam effect was never created or seen, leaving these weapons as decorative props throughout the film. Fact 8. Belt clip design mystery. One of the more puzzling aspects of the motion picture phaser design involves a belt clip feature that seems to appear and disappear depending on which photos or documentation you examine. The official design patent filed by Richard M. Rubin clearly shows a very definite clip mechanism for hooking the phaser onto a belt or belt loop, similar to how a modern police officer might carry their radio or other equipment on their uniform. This clip is prominently featured in the patent drawings, suggesting it was considered an important part of the weapon's practical design for Starfleet personnel who would need to carry these weapons while moving around the ship. However, when you start looking at photographs of the actual screen-used props and production stills from the filming, the belt clip appears inconsistently from one phaser to another, creating confusion about whether all the props were built with this feature or only some of them. Documentation from prop collectors who have examined original Hero phasers confirms that at least one Hero prop definitely featured the belt clip attachment, proving that the design wasn't just theoretical but was actually implemented on at least some of the finished weapons. The most likely explanation for this inconsistency is that the belt clip was a removable